Welcome everyone to Making Pandemic Pizza. My name is Carolyn Kane and I'm an Assistant Director of Alumni Relations here at DePaul. I'm so glad so many of you are able to join us this evening, and I'm going to quickly review some Zoom procedures for our event today. So first, I wanted to note that the video and audio of all participants is turned off to ensure the best possible experience for everyone joining us today. And if you have any questions for our host throughout the presentation, please feel free to send them via the chat feature, and we'll be saving a little time for questions when we get the pizza in the oven and then towards the end, so you can keep the questions coming. And I'm also going to note that live captioning will be enabled for this event, so you're able to adjust the size of the text and other settings by navigating the caption button at the bottom of your screen. And finally, this event will be recorded and will be available within the next 2 weeks. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about John Carruthers. John is a 2009 communication alum who is the communications manager at Revolution Brewing and the proprietor of Crust Fun Pizza. Crust Fun is a monthly pop-up that sells pizzas through Instagram for the benefit of community organizations, making Chicago a better place. It's been featured in the Chicago Reader, Eater Chicago, ABC's Localish, and the Drew Barrymore Show most recently. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to John.
Thanks, Carolyn. Welcome everybody to what I will say is my first Zoom cooking class, so please be kind. But I wanted to walk you through the basics of making tavern style pizza, because this became my pandemic hobby. I had baked 0 tavern style pizzas before last March. And if I can do it and turn it into a thing, I'm fairly confident you can too, because I'm not any better at pizza than any of you. So you've got the recipe, you've got the instructions, and I kind of wanted to walk you through the different parts. So let's start with dough. Like I said, I use a food processor, but you can use a stand mixer or your hands if you're feeling really determined and have a lot of time to kill. But I'm going to show you here. I've got my dry ingredients, my high gluten flour. You can also use bread flour, cornmeal, yeast, salt, and sugar. And I'm about to add chilled water and olive oil. So this won't impress any of the people who make margarita pizza with the small number of ingredients, but it really gets the job done for a bar pie. So you hit the dough mode if you have one. I have a dough hook on here. You can still make this in a regular food processor. And I'm going to start yelling over this while it goes, because it's going to take a minute. So let it process. Like I said, yelling over it. It'll take a few seconds, and then it'll start to form kind of a shaggy mass. What you're looking for is when it starts to make a ball that rides along the blade to where you start hearing the processor start and stop and see one cohesive thing spin around. It differs with humidity in the recipe, so if you're having any trouble, you add a little bit of extra water and it'll come together just fine. So if you can see this, it's starting to form one mass that's moving around. And this is what I'm talking about if you can hear it. It's a ball that's skipping along the blade. So you start to count in your head 30 to 40 seconds when this starts. And usually when I do this, I don't have to play it for time because there's not someone recording this, but I am now. So while not saying a lot, I am killing this 30 to 40 seconds that we need. And after that, hit stop. And it's a lot easier to hear each other. What you're going to do is set a timer for 20 minutes and allow this to come together, and then just do it all over again. You want to take it out to free it from the blade. And that's just so your food processor isn't straining and you break it. When you make as much pizza as I have, you have to be careful that the thing doesn't overheat. But for now, we will put this aside because we have some dough made, because I also grew up watching Channel 11 cooking shows, and I know that that's the key. Once you have your dough ready, you make it into 4 equal portions, about 295 grams each. That's why I always recommend a scale. It's the easiest way to make the same thing every time. Oil it, put it in here, and like I said in the directions, let it ferment anywhere from overnight to 7 days. Make sure you oil it so it's a little easier to get out, but if you don't, it's no problem. So we're gonna pop this guy. That landed in the sink, I want you to know. And then kind of just gently take it off the sides and slide it out. And then just press it down with your hand like that. And from there, you're gonna wanna work it into just sort of a disc shape. Use plenty of flour on your board. Feel free to have extra. It's just gonna help you stretch it out. Don't worry about the dough being dry. It's a cracker crust dough. You don't need a huge rise. It's gonna be just fine. So use your fingertips, not your fingernails or your whole hand, and just sort of dimple it out and press it out until it's ready to go. If it keeps stretching back, it might mean that it's a little cold still from the fridge if you haven't taken it out ahead of time. Just give it a little time, let it come to temperature. Eventually the gluten, which is the thing, you know, creating the rise, but also creating stretches, will relax a little bit and it'll be easier to work with. One big difference between Chicago thin crust and, you know, New York or really anywhere else is that this is fed through a dough sheeter, which is the same kind of thing you use to make layers for croissants or baklava or really any kind of thin layered dough. You and I, unless we're scrounging Craigslist with an extra $600 to $3,000 to spare, do not have a dough sheeter at home, and that's fine. So I turn to the sacrilege among the pizza dads. The rolling pin gets the exact job done. Just roll it out, making sure to turn it and flip it so you get kind of an even distribution. And the way this dough is made and the recipe is made, this should roll out to just over 14 inches, you know, the kind of pie that we're targeting here. If you're having trouble, you can always add extra flour and kind of rub it gently in. You can also press it out to retain the shape. A lot of people get frustrated at this part because it's not all that, you know, it's not all that, it's not something that we've all done a lot. Here's the secret, is that you can make this thing look totally messed up, like the Picasso statue downtown's head, and it's still gonna taste exactly the same. It's gonna taste amazing. And, you know, with pizza dough, like with cooking anything, just the more you do it, every time you do it, no matter how good or bad you think it does, or how many things you knock off the counter, it's going to taste great. So you really don't have to worry. I would say the number one reason people don't make pizza more is, I guess maybe A, because it's 90 degrees and my oven's at 550, but B, because they're just frustrated with the dough shaping and handling. And I promise it's going to taste great if you follow the directions. And, you know, if it doesn't look good, who cares? You're not selling this in an alley. Only a weirdo would do that. So you've got your dough. You can, a little bit like New York, kind of stretch it out over your knuckles if you like to do that. If you over roll it, it's no problem. You lay your pizza pan, or I use the pizza cardboards over this, trim it with a pizza cutter, and it'll be perfect. It'll be fine. If you're not fitting it in a box and it fits generally on your pizza stone or steel, have a bigger pizza. It's totally fine. So I would take this myself, and this is ready to bake now. What I've been doing since I sell pizzas out of my house, and what you can do to get a more restaurant quality thing, is you take however many of these you make and roll out and stretch, and you layer it between pieces of nonstick parchment paper. And if you got the fridge space, you can put it in your fridge overnight, and it kind of dries out and tackifies just a little bit. And it gets this incredible crispy, like Pat's pizza. Not that I'm saying I make pizza as good as Pat's, but it gets this good, crispy, like amazing, true to style bar pizza technique. So I have a texture. So put this aside. We will get one of the pre-prepared ones, and I will show you how to do this. And like Harold said, drop any questions in the chat, or if you want to talk about pizza, or if we want to have another mindless argument about deep dish, I'm all for that too. So now we've got the pizza peel. This is what you're going to slide into your oven. Theoretically, if you don't want to buy one of these and you don't have a steel, you could probably take a rimless baking sheet and put parchment paper on it and slide it into the oven and just let it bake on the parchment. It's not going to insulate a lot of the heat, which is great. And it shouldn't theoretically catch fire. I know that paper catches fire at 451, as Ray Bradbury told us, but That's really more of an absolute temperature than what's given in your oven. So generously cornmeal pizza peel. If there's a second frustration to pizza is that the pizza sticks and it goes everywhere or becomes a very sad calzone. Add plenty of cornmeal here. Don't go fancy. Don't go like the Anson Mills, like corn grits. You really kind of want a fine texture. You're really just using this as rollerblades for the pizza dough. So buy cheap Quaker Oats cornmeal. It's completely fine. Once you've got that, I have got our overnight cured dough here. Same thing I just showed you, just rested in the fridge overnight. Nice, a little bit dry, which is exactly what we want. So it crisps up as soon as it hits that steel. This is a very quick pizza bake. So, you know, you want to really emphasize the texture and the crunch as much as you can. Take this, put it on the generously cornmeal piece. You've got a slightly more hydrated side here. And this is where our dough docker comes in. If you don't have a dough docker, and why would you if you eat pizza all the time? They're very cheap and easy to store, but you can use a fork, you can use anything, and you want to use a toothpick, it's fine. But this is the really important part of making tavern style pizza. You not only want the underside and the edges of the crust to really get crispy and cook fast, you also want every part. You don't want a soggy, like gross middle piece that's just all cheese and sausage soup. So the way we do that is it's called docking the dough. This is just a roller that puts little bitty holes all the way in here. I use a plastic one instead of a metal one because I'm paranoid about a metal one dinging up my pizza peel and making it harder to slide, but you can get both kinds. You really can't do too much of this, so I say lay it on, especially get it near the edges where the dough tends to rise and puff up. I know we all like the big puffy bubble on the occasional slice of New York pie, or gosh, when I was a kid, Pizza Hut pizza, but not what we're going for here in the tavern. Once you've got that, the dough is docked, it's ready to go. Take your sauce. I did not walk you through this because it was pour a bunch of stuff in and blend it, and I figured you had that. But this is a great thing to have a ladle for. Let's take it here, start from the center, and then just work your way out with circles going outdoors. This is literally, I know you know I'm a communications graduate. This is the only thing I've ever used trigonometry for, and only in passing. So spread it out, make sure not to put too much sauce on. Part of the great enjoyable nature of tavern style pizza is it doesn't feel like anything is too much. It's all in perfect balance. So you don't want too much cheese, but you also don't want too much sauce. You want to give the dough enough time to rise and crisp up. And, you know, if you just have an absolute ton of sauce, this is something I do because I'm a big fan of tomatoey pizzas. It won't get quite the same spring to it. Once you got the sauce, my secret thing, which is not a secret, has always been grated Parmesan. And this is fresh, like off the block Parmesan. Put a layer between the sauce and anything else you do first. It creates it's an aged cheese, so it creates a lot of that rich, unctuous umami flavor. And just be generous with it. Just F up your pizza with it. It's delicious. So once you've got that, move on to mozzarella. And I put this in the recipe, but I use full fat mozzarella and I grate it myself. The difference between that is just the way it melts and the way the final texture is. You know, I don't know whether you grew up on the north side or the south side of the suburbs, but I think everyone who likes tavern style pizza really likes the well done pie where the cheese is a little colored with the tomato sauce and the oil from the pepperoni or sausage or whatever else, and it's got those little blister bubbles, and it's not white and stringy. It's just a well done piece of very caramelized pizza with cheese on it. And the best way to do that is just to get the full fat mozzarella. It's easier to find here. Theoretically, you could de-package a bunch of string cheese and shred that because it's about the same thing. But sprinkle it evenly over. Like I said, not too much of anything. So, you know, don't put too much cheese on it, but it's your pizza and I'm not your mom and you can do whatever you want. I'm gonna go grab the sausage out of the fridge because that did not seem like a thing to keep on the counter today. Be right back. Okay, sausage. America as a pizza nation is a pepperoni nation, at least among the people who eat meat. But Chicago is unique in that Chicago is a sausage town with our livestock and stockyard history and our great Italian sausage, Polish. We make our own sausage and we dig it here. I make my own sausage. I don't think I included this. Feel free to reach out. I will give anyone the recipe. It's not complicated. I own a meat grinder because I got married and put that on the wedding registry. Highly recommended. For a 14-inch pizza like this, I recommend exactly 1/2 pound of sausage. And it sounds like a lot, but you know, look at me, I'm not a triathlete. I think it's the perfect amount, and you take my opinion on pizza over, someone else. The important thing here is you take these sort of big chunks and start laying them out along the center. And I'm sorry that you're gonna have to watch me do this whole thing. I do not have a pre-sausage pizza. But give them equal spot. The difference between an amateur looking home pizza and a really cool professional looking home pizza is really just, at least with tavern style, like when you cut it up, is there toppings on every piece? Is there like a big burst of flavor on every one? So I don't know if you can see here, what I do is I lay one line out and then I stagger the next line. So I put it one over between the first two pieces of sausage. Pizza geometry is also a beautiful thing. You should have, like I said, 1/2 pound is not like a thing I guessed at. 1/2 pound laid out like this, if you're cutting into 4 and 4, is about as much as you need to cover the whole pizza without overloading it or ending up with some bare spots. Unless you're taking it out with a cookie scoop, and who has time for that, you're going to get different size pieces. My advice would be to put the bigger size pieces near the edge where they'll get just a big blast of heat and help caramelize the edge of the crust. So we're just going to finish laying this out here. The recipe for this is just pork shoulder, salt, pepper, a little brown sugar, Italian seasoning, fennel, and then depending on whether I'm feeding this to my kids or not, or eating it myself, some spicy dried chilies, which really do it for me, but it's perfectly delicious and bright, as far as these big sausage pizzas go, even if you don't. And then you grind the meat first, toss it with those spices, and then you run it back through the meat grinder to really get everything going together. So I've got a little extra here to bulk up the edges. And I did. And if you look, 1/2 pound gone. And look, it goes perfectly on the pizza. Washing my hands because of the raw meat. And we're back. Second secret that is not really a secret, another coat of Parmesan over the toppings. It's delicious. And honestly, if you're selling back alley pizza, you could do worse than to give people an extra oomph of flavor than you're looking for. You could use the canned Parmesan for this. I personally do not like this stuff, but it'll melt into the sauce well. It'll melt onto the topping well. It's great. If you notice, I'm pressing this down because we're about to throw this in the oven. And as you know, you got to slide it in. Sausage is a little easier to stop. We call it migration. I call it migration. I don't know who we are. But pressing down to kind of marry the sausage into the sauce and stick it in there, just make sure that you don't slide it in and then take out a 3/4 sausage pizza with a very frustrating distribution later. Sorry, one more time to the sink. And we're gonna slide our pizza in the oven. So this is a great time to put out any questions, any arguments. I guess I would say Marie's is my favorite tavern style pizza. If you would like to use that as a jumping off board for any arguments or threats directed at me, perfectly fine. But we're gonna do this now. This is the part where confidence is key as opposed to technique. You've got to trust in your ability to slide this out onto your pizza stone or steel. And it's really easy once you've done it a few times, but those first few times suck, and I understand that. So plenty of cornmeal, cured dough, confidence. Here's how I do it. I don't think this will be particularly instructive because I've been doing this, but and it goes. It's good. And you hear that sizzle, and you know that something great's going to come out just a few minutes later. So I'm turning the oven down to 500 now and setting the timer for 8 minutes. 8 minutes is a great way to kind of just gauge where your toppings are at. You kind of just want to look in, and you would way rather have it underbaked than scorched because you can always add a few extra minutes. So Carolyn, if we have any questions or other talk, this is also a great time to open a beer from Revolution Brewing.
Thanks so much, John. We did have a few questions and a few comments. Allison just said that they were so happy for this, and they live in Seattle now, where decent pizza, no matter what type it is just non-existent. So there's a lot of good things out there, and pizza's not one of them. So they're just happy to be able to crave it again.
That's awesome. I have two recommendations for Seattle. One is, I forgot what it's called. There is a deep dish pizza place in Seattle that does very good acclaimed deep dish pizza. And I don't know what it is, but I'm sure if you Googled it, it would be like, they say that it is up to the level of and above Chicago. Second is in Tacoma. And I know this place because I've been there. It's called the Red Hot. If you are really missing Chicago, the Red Hot in Tacoma, they serve real Vienna beef hot dogs and put on these great specials. This place, it's the dog lovers, like homesick Chicago hangout. So glad you could join me. I hope you can throw a little love to these other exiled Chicagoans out in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay. Perfect. And then Joan said, do you grease pools from the chunky sausage? And if so, how do you deal with it?
I don't. So as opposed to some of the other sausages that you'll get, this is really just straight up ground pork shoulder. There's no added fat back or lard, and that's because I know I'm cooking it quick and fast on a pizza. If you're getting grease pools, I would switch to a leaner meat grind or a different sausage, or just use less. Because some of the grease, like, it's a fine dance. You know, it's like you want this pizza to be greasy and delicious and feel like you're getting away with something, but too much and it's like nauseating. It's just like, what have I become? So I'm happy to send you my recipe for this one. And that's what I would do for a sausage I did not make.
Okay, we had a question. If we're lazy and we don't want to make our own crust, are there pre-made crusts that you recommend?
I've heard really great things about Trader Joe's. Some Chicago pizza places, and it's kind of like bit by bit will sell you just some dough, or give you some if you really want. The first time I got a pizza oven when I was learning to make Neapolitan pizza, Spaccanapoli, which is one of the best Italian like Neapolitan pizza restaurants in the country. I don't remember why I did this. I just asked them if they would sell me some dough, and they said, no, here, we'll just give you some, just like have fun. You know, it was nice. But I hear Trader Joe's is good. I know Whole Foods has a really good selection of pre-made dough that really, all you have to do is kind of just take the chill off of it and leave it out, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff. It's also a great way to make garlic knots. If you buy some of that, all you really do is roll it into snakes and tie it into knots and add some garlic butter and seasoning, and boom, you just got, you know, another way to eat carbohydrates in a pizza adjacent manner.
Thanks. Is there any reason to use a wood peel as opposed to a metal peel? Also, do you know anywhere buffalo mozzarella can be purchased in Chicago area or north suburbs?
So I like the wooden peel for constructing the pizza and sliding it off because it's a little more substantial. I do have a big metal peel, but I find that can be harder to distribute the cornmeal, or if you're using semolina and have it stay in the same place. Spoiler alert, we're actually going to take it out with a metal peel. I use both because I think that I would sooner stick like a spatula in my bare hand in the oven and try to take it out with a wood peel just because it's not skinny enough. But these are great. And the metal peels are great for turning if it's baking unevenly because everyone's ovens are different. You can kind of go in halfway through and adjust it with this really easily, which you really can't do with a wooden peel. For buffalo mozzarella, I would suggest Italy. And some of the neighborhood markets have it, but it's been a while since I've been using, like, this kind of pizza cheese is a real Midwestern thing. So I haven't been on my high-end artisan mozzarella all that much lately.
Okay, another question. What is the difference between bread flour and white flour? And how will the pizza be different depending on which we use? Also, okay, well,
Sorry, go ahead.
so let's start off with that and then I'll come back.
Now, I should have a pair of, I don't have glasses, but I would love to have a pair of prop glasses when I have to answer this question. This is, if you want to like really nerd out on pizza, you get on these forums and people are talking flours in a way that other countries talk religions or historical borders. The difference between bread flour and white flour and like what I use high gluten flour is basically protein content. It's how much of the flour is activated into protein. And all that means is like how strong of a gluten bond it forms when you work it. So bread flour is meant to form a tighter matrix and a bigger rise. Lesser gluten like white flour will have like less of a rise. You would use that for something like a flatbread pizza or something else. You can use any of these for anything, and I think you'll be happy with the result. But it's like once you start futzing around, like you kind of find the flour you like to work with. This high gluten flour rises really high and stretches really big, and it crisp, like when I bake it, it has a nice snap. But you could do the same thing with different levels of hydration, which is like how much water is in the dough, how much oil is in the dough, or different proportions of yeast and sugar. But it's easier to have the flour that you like with the protein. Like bread flour is 12% protein, high gluten flour is 14%, and then white flour is 8 to 10%, I guess, depending on where you buy. Someone could correct me on that, but you're really just trying to get a bigger gluten matrix for some of these like hearth baked products, like the artisan breads and stuff, and a lot of the high, like the stuff that you tear and it's just got this incredible matrix, uses a lot more high gluten flour. There was a second part.
What is the plastic tool called that you used?
It's called a dough docker, and you can buy this on Amazon for really cheap or anywhere. And like I said, you can use a fork, but like doing this 700 times as opposed to just rolling it across a few times is worth the extra effort. And I hate things that do one thing in the kitchen as much as anyone, but like I'm a pizza guy
now. For the sauce, is there a preference for if we use pizza sauce or pasta sauce?
I would use pizza sauce because it's going to have, like, pasta sauce tends to have a different, it has more onion, more garlic, depending on what you buy, and a different spice profile. Pizza sauce is just going to, like, it's formulated to taste like the pizza you grew up eating and remember. So if you're not making your own, I would go with one of many pizza sauces, but it's also, I don't know if you're taking a look at the recipe, I have a lot of ingredients, but all you really need to make pizza sauce is a 28-ounce can of tomatoes, and then you just chuck it in a blender or put a stick blender in it. I mean, that's simply like pizza sauce, at its most basic. I think that the longer you make pizza, 8 minutes, God, I can talk for 8 minutes like it's nothing. The longer you make pizza, I think the more ingredients you'll add to your pizza sauce list. But everyone I know who started making their own, even if it's just blending salt, pepper, and tomatoes in a thing, like really comes away with like a specific preference of a flavor they like and a way to kind of make their own secret sauce. So let's check the pizza. Looks pretty good. I think we're going to take it out. So if you really want to annoy your spouse or loved one or family, you can buy 200 of these cardboard pizza circles online for really cheap on Amazon, and they just send it to your house. But if not, you throw it onto a cutting board or whatever. The one thing you don't want to do is cut it on this wooden pizza peel, because you're going to start to create nicks and grooves in it, and it's going to start grabbing stuff when you try to slide your pizza in. I made that mistake with my first pizza peel, and I still have it, but I don't use it anymore. Basically a hoarder. Otherwise, I would throw it away. So that is a good tip. Pizza cardboard is great. From now, I give about, I should hold this up, right? This is a cooking show. Boom. So before you cut it, it's important to give it like a minute or two just to cool down so that when you're using your slicer, you're not just yanking all the crust and toppings off. Turn off the oven. It's out of here. So in the equipment thing, I suggested a dough rocker. This is just because for this style, it's just easier to keep that geometric shape. I think we've all had the experience with the dull roller cutter that's been in the drawer for 11 years, where you try to cut through a pizza and you end up cutting a new and modernist shape of pizza. But you can use that for here too. Again, no one cares what your pizza looks like because it's going to be delicious. Let's clean up here. And feel free to cut however many pieces, big or small, you like. This style of pizza was originally so people could get loaded at a bar, hold it in one hand with a napkin and drink with the other. It was a different time. We had about 10 times more taverns in Chicago. So feel free to cut it as big or as small as you like. What I like to do is do 4 cuts one way, flip it, and 4 cuts the other way. I have many bartenders who have non-kitchen bars who will back me up on that being just about the right amount. I don't know if you can hear this, but when you cut into a good tavern cut pizza, especially like baked on a steel or stone, you should hear a good crunch. Like you're not used to hearing that from pizza, but with this style, it's absolutely a sign that you're on the right track. Hope you heard that. It sounds good. For one way. And for the other, it doesn't matter if they're not exactly even because no one's going to care because this pizza is going to disappear super fast. But make sure you don't lose the corners. The corners are the absolute treasure of your tavern pizza real estate. And sometimes if you're talking to a computer and not paying attention, you get one this small. And I got to tell you, that's like finding a unicorn. First piece out every time. So here we have a square cut Chicago tavern style pizza, the kind that we all, or a lot of us, grew up eating, as opposed to, and I love deep dish, as opposed to a thick, big, heavy special occasion pizza. About 8 minutes in the oven. If you don't have someone yammering at you in his kitchen, you can do this a lot faster than I did. So hope you dig it. Do we have any more questions, Carolyn?
Yes, we do. For starters, the cut was amazing. Best part.
I practice.
It sounds like it's going to be like the best pizza ever. Someone wanted to know, where do you get your flour?
So I have a restaurant membership from whenever, but a lot of the grocery stores would be happy to order or sell you high gluten flour. Whole Foods, Caputo's, I know especially is pretty good if you're in the Chicagoland area. But anything, King Arthur also makes a lot of really nice specialty baking flours that have the protein content listed. Honestly, it doesn't really even matter the brand unless you're really trying to avoid unbleached flour. Just look at that protein content. And really any place should be able to order it for you. Like all the major flour brands have their own lines. The cool thing is, like, if any of you have a friend with a restaurant or something, if you can get your hands on a Restaurant Depot card, you can buy 50 pounds of flour for like $14. It's wild. I've gone through hundreds of pounds of flour just because it is like cheaper than bottled water now. Like, you know, when you buy it in bulk, you just kind of have a place to store it, as my wife has to remind me. So, you know, that is a factor, but it shouldn't be too hard to find. And if you've got to start out with King Arthur, the blue label bread flour, that's perfectly fine. That'll work great.
Funny thing is, someone asks, how does your wife feel about your pizza obsession?
Conflicted. No, she's super supportive. I tell people that in terms of crust fun pizza, I make the pizzas, but she's the most important part of the team because she is the patient one. Where we worked on a pizza book that's coming out soon, and it's all for charity. It's one of those old spiral bound, old fashioned, like, church rectory, YMCA, school fundraiser books. And she wrote the forward to it. She likes it. She just, she has to keep me in check, because when left unchecked, I do stuff like this, and then suddenly I'm transacting in an alley over the cover of night. And like, yeah, that's an alarming development for your spouse if that's not what they were into when you met them.
Someone wanted to know, how did you develop your pizza sauce recipe? They said that malt vinegar is hard to find.
Oh, malt vinegar is? So that's probably not in the regular vinegar section. If you go into like Mariano's or Whole Foods or Jewel even, it's not with the vinegar that regular people buy. It's with that little wall of weird British things that they keep on hand to keep our diplomatic relationship with England intact. So it's like the weirdly, like they call them biscuits, but they're cookies. And there's like the HP sauce that's just brown. And malt vinegar is there. It's like what they serve with fish and chips. So you should be able to find it. But apart from white vinegar, I would kind of sub anything in here. You can use cider vinegar if you really like it. Balsamic vinegar has a huge flavor punch. I've used champagne vinegar, but I would never write that in a recipe for someone else because it's the most pretentious sounding thing I could think of for a bar pizza. There's sherry vinegar. It's, you can really kind of like, what you're really doing is you're balancing like the bright acidity of the tomatoes with like a more like umami kind of cooked salty richness. And then you're finishing it off by either adding a little salt, or you're adding a little, if you taste a sauce and it needs something, you're like, this needs something and I don't know what. Half the time it's salt, and the other half it's something like vinegar, which is like acidic and kind of fruity and brightens it up. So in terms of my process, like I said, you can just start by, blending your own tomatoes. I think it's worth it to buy like the $3 can of like the San Marzano or fake San Marzano ones. But then, you can add a little, like I would mix butter and oil and then fry the garlic in that. So I've got this like cool fried garlic thing going with the tomatoes. Well, then after that, it was like, how can I make this richer? So I started putting the tomato paste in there and cooking the spices in the tomato paste. Then I added fish sauce, because that is a secret ingredient to cuisines all over the world. My grandmother loves my pasta sauce recipe, and I'll never tell her for the rest of her life it's because of fish sauce, because she'll never have it again. So it's just between me and you guys. But then after that, it's the last step is all just kind of about brightening up how it's finished. Like if you need a little sugar, don't be afraid to do that. You're not going for anything authentic here. If you need a little salt, that's okay. But I find that like the most compelling things where people are like, wow, that's a really good sauce, you made this yourself, is when you take the time to cook it and then there's some bright vinegar notes at the end.
Oh, good. And you answered one of the other questions somebody asked, why do you add malt vinegar to the sauce? So thanks for that.
It really just depends on what you like. And malt vinegar is very rich and it goes with like fried food. So it goes well with kind of a pizza thing. Some of the other like sherry and champagne or bread or balsamic is a huge thing, and it's got a big Italian background, works well with those herbs. You can use that too. And it seems like everyone's got cider vinegar now, so wouldn't hit on that. It's bright, it's fruity. You just have to make sure it's rich enough to stand up to it.
Okay. Someone wanted to know, is there a vegetarian friendly substitute for fish sauce in your sauce recipe? Also, why is there fish sauce in your sauce recipe?
Fish sauce. So when I say umami, I'm not trying to sound pretentious. I just mean it's the baseline flavor for like, you get something that's rich and it's like it might even taste meaty even though there's no meat or anything. It's just that like satisfying hit of a rich bite. And that's derived through something called glutamates. So these are foods like soy sauce, mushrooms, fish sauce, and these are MSG even. These are all packed with glutamates, and that contributes to that savory, rich, completed, like round feeling of a dish like this. So fish sauce is just kind of a shortcut to that. You could also add soy sauce, anchovy paste. I would add anchovy paste to a lot of things, but somehow people are even more skittish about that than fish sauce, which I completely understand. It comes in a tube and it's gray and it is not the coolest looking thing or smelling thing. But you cook it down with a lot of other things. For vegetarians and vegans, we're going to go back to that weird aisle of British food. There is this product called Marmite. It is not Vegemite. please don't mistake it with that. It's called Marmite. It is basically a yeast extract. It started as like kind of a brewer's yeast extract, but it is just concentrated flavor in this little glass jar. And you can substitute like 1/4 of the amount of fish sauce with Marmite, and it's just great. It's got a very funky, like confrontational taste, like fish sauce would probably have. But it is so good that you might just come to love it. And like in a big pot of sauce, it's the thing rounding off all these other flavors and bringing them together. And it's got that same punch of like really rich, meaty flavor that the fish sauce has, but it's completely vegan.
Okay. Someone wants to know, do you prefer 00 sour?
Not for this kind of pizza, but yes, that's real. That's what I would make like an Italian Neapolitan pizza with. That's a really high quality, fine flour. I should really waste the money to figure out how we can make a 00 tavern style pizza, like a $50 tavern style pizza we can sell at the hotels downtown. I'd be into it.
And just one last question. How did you get started? And tell us a little bit more about this.
Oh yeah. I guess two quite like pizza and the selling it in a strange way. Honestly, last May, I mean, I've been cooking. My first job was in a kitchen. I was out of it for several years, but I've been cooking for years, and I've written cookbooks and I've done pop-ups and all this stuff, but none of it was really pizza. None of it was really dough. And then when lockdown happened last March, I don't know if you can tell, I'm like a talker. I like to be with other people. It was driving me insane. But another thing that me and my wife had always talked about before pandemic was like, we would really like to have a pizza, like a designated pizza and a movie night with the kids, where it's just like, we'll turn on. I mean, I wanted to watch Star Wars selfishly, but it's like we can have the kids, we introduce them to the classics. So we decided we would watch Disney movies and I would make pizza. And I knew that I wanted to make a tavern style pizza because I'd done New York before, I'd done Neapolitan. But it's hard to do Neapolitan in a wood-fired oven outside in Chicago in March. And I felt fine with New York, but I wanted to really try tavern style pizza because I miss places like Marie's and all these other places we couldn't go. So we started doing it every Friday, and we were just making, 4 pizzas and kind of eating it through the weekend. And then come summer 2020, which was a terrible summer, not to turn this into a political or social thing, but there was a lot of terrible things happening in Chicago and the world. And it's easy to be frustrated when you're mostly locked up in your house and your primary skill is making pizza for the other 3 people you share the house with. Like, how can I help? But I thought it was a cop out. Like if I can just sell these pizzas to people to support the organizations that I think do make a difference in Chicago, that's what I did. And people have bought the pizza. We're going to probably bump up against $10,000 in total contributions this month or next. So it's been exciting. I still don't have any skills as a community organizer. I myself cannot lift up marginalized communities, of which there are many in Chicago. But if I make pizza, then other people can. I'm doing a little. It makes me feel a little better. And I think if we all do a little, it gets better.
Well, thank you so much, John, again for this. This is recorded for those who wasn't able to join us today. So we'll have this available in a few weeks. And again, thank you all for coming out tonight and making pandemic pizza. Thanks again, John, so much.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions or wants to bother me, my email is crustfundpizza@gmail.com and on Instagram @nachosandlager. I am happy to talk pizza anytime I'm not actually sleeping. So please feel free.
Thank you so much. And everybody is in the chat saying that this was awesome. And thank you so, so much.
Thanks for joining us.